Hey, it's Matt, your average gamer, and for this one, we're going to be doing an entire Crucible Knight set. I'm going to show you where to get everything. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything here, by the way. We're going to have to take on some Crucible Knights. They can be pretty tough as far as getting the items, but once you do, you're going to have a powerful Strength and Faith build. We are going to be maining Ordovis Greatsword, which is one of my favorite weapons in the game. The Vortex, the special unique Ash of War that it has on it, does a lot of posture damage while also hitting hard with a good percentage of physical damage. And with the opener here, we're of course on New Game +7, taking on the Draconic Tree Sentinel, who's not going to last too long. We did get a posture break early on, although his posture breaking is a little bit different. He does take a lot of damage from this. Again, it's a lot of physical damage on the weapon art with a little bit of holy, which makes it ideal for most bosses. Even the ones that are holy resistant still take a pretty good amount of damage when it comes to Ordovis Greatsword. It's a really reliable and powerful Strength and Faith weapon, and then we're going to be utilizing all of the Crucible aspects, all the incantations that are involved there in the entire set and shield. First things first, I'm going to start with one of the lesser known ones, and that's the first Crucible Knight, and that is at the Rampart Tower site of Grace in Stormville Castle. If you follow me here, we're going to take on that Crucible Knight so we can get the Horns incantation. So if you follow me here to a secret area, we're going to go to the left. Make sure you kill all the eagles, otherwise they might end up knocking you off. And as we drop and find our way down here, we will end up with one of the first Crucible Knights in the game, and that is the one at the Stormville Castle bottom here. Continue to work your way down, and this is a little bit of a secret area. This is actually an area I hadn't been in a long time. It had been probably months since I've been down here. I had to remember where to go, and then once you're down here, you are going to have to fight a rather tough Crucible Knight. Like most of them, he does have a little bit of an annoying moveset. He did kill me once, by the way. He managed to get me one time, but we're able to get him on the second try. I do recommend, since we're a Strength and Faith build, if you want to take these guys on, you're going to see me do this later in the video, but the Blasphemous Blade is always an option to make things a little bit easier. Chose to use Ordovis Greatsword to fight him. Probably not the best. It's good for a lot of bosses in the game, but given the resistance to physical damage and the fact that it takes a little bit to charge up if you're using the charge version of it, he can end up stunning you fairly often. If I went back in time and I was grabbing these, I probably would have used the Blasphemous Blade for all of them, because you get that range and it's just so overpowered to begin with, and then you can kind of stand back from a safer distance rather than get beat up like I did here, because their moveset is incredibly aggressive. No, I was getting incredibly greedy here, and it's been a long time since I fought the Crucible Knights because, to be honest, most of the time I just avoid them now. They're really powerful enemies, they have strong movesets, they have a lot of range even when it looks like they don't, and honestly for most builds they don't drop a ton that you usually need. Everything's timestamped in the description, so if you know where everything is, feel free to jump to that next mark beyond where to find everything. And if you don't know where to find everything, I'm going to show you where to get all of the Crucible items in the game that you're going to have to mainly fight Crucible Knights for, which can be obviously a little bit on the tougher side, but we're going to grab each individual item and do the entire build. After we take this Crucible Knight down here, which we were able to do, we got the Horns incantation aspects of the Crucible. There's going to be 3 incantations that we need. I'll show it is on the map there again, but I showed it before as well at the Rampart Tower site of Grace, jumping down from there. And next up is, for this one, I'm just going to show the end of the fight here, and then I'm going to show it on the map. This is the one that's near Stormville Castle at the Evergoal, and it's going to drop aspects of the Crucible tail, which does a decent amount of posture damage. You can see he's using tail on me there, and we're able to finish off the Crucible Knight. I'll show it where it is on the map. This is actually by gate front. It's a little bit over it on the left if you go past it and come back, and there it is on the map there. And the next one up that we're going to show is Breath. Aspects of the Crucible Breath can be a little bit challenging to get. It's in Volcano Manor after you beat Rykard. You have to beat Rykard first, and then when you go and kill, I believe her name is Tanith there, she's trying to, I don't know what she's doing, eating Rykard's head or whatever. After she's doing that, once you kill her, you get invaded by Tanith's Knight, and after you defeat this Knight, which is one of the more challenging Crucible Knights in the game in my opinion, he'll drop Breath. When he invades, be prepared for a fight. This is definitely one of the tougher ones. He hits really hard, and on top of that, he has a fairly good amount of HP, and it is an invasion, so he can also surprise you too, depending on where you are and exactly where he appears. He also uses the Breath incantation, which doesn't do a ton of damage, but it can stun and knock you down depending on your poise. I'm using Ordovis Greatsword, which actually has a decently wide range when it hits the ground, and for me, the best thing that you can possibly do with him is bait some of his longer range attacks like Breath and whatnot, and then punish afterwards, because he is really challenging, he's super aggressive, and he has a reasonable amount of HP. If If you haven't fought him before, yeah, he's definitely one of the ones that can give you some trouble, no doubt. And that is in Rykard's Arena. I'll show you it on the map here. And then the one that we're going to get, the item that we're going to get after this, is going to be the Erdtree Seal, which is going to have good faith scaling for this build. Also a weightless seal, and I'm starting to really like weightless seals. When it comes to pushing the limits of your equipment load, having a weightless seal is a huge benefit, so that's really nice too. And it has really good faith scaling. It's in the dungeon Volcano Manor. Here it is on the map here. Now for this, where the dungeon starts, you're going to see an Omen Killer, and it's not far by from there. It's actually relatively easy to get from the beginning of the dungeon, especially if you go through the Volcano Manor part of it and through that invisible wall, you'll be able to get it. Next up here is, this one, the Crucible Horn Shield, you get in Nokron. You're going to head towards that dual gargoyle boss fight where the secret area is, where the jellyfish shield, you drop down. There's 2 Crucible Knights there. One drops a smithing stone. The one with the shield will drop the Crucible Horn Shield, and there it is on the map there. Next up is the final one we're going to get in my favorite addition to the build, and that is Ordovis Greatsword and the Crucible Axe set. Now, for the Crucible Axe set and Ordovis Greatsword, you're going to have to fight 2 Crucible Knights. This is going to be in the dungeon near where the Draconic Tree Sentinel is in the Altless Plateau. I'll show it on the map after, and I elected after dying once to use the Blasphemous Blade to make the fight a little easier. I recommend this as well, especially if you're going to solo this fight, because you can get rid of the one without the shield fairly quickly, and then you can take on the tougher one, which is obviously the one that has the shield and Ordovis Greatsword. Now, as far as the other one, he has ranged attacks, but he's vulnerable to everything you do because he has no guard. So make sure you get rid of him first to make your life a little bit easier, and when he goes down, which is going to be in short order here, be careful, by the way, he does have Celiaria's Tree, so he has that ranged attack, but once he's down, we can focus on the one Crucible Knight. For this, if you're running the Blasphemous Blade to make your life a little bit easier and you want to solo this fight, then I would recommend just standing back, getting as many hits as you can with the Blasphemous Blade, because if you're up close to him, he can end up comboing you and killing you fairly quickly. This is on New Game +7, so he does even more damage. Yeah, as far as this goes, you can definitely take this fight on solo with the Blasphemous Blade, no question about it, and it will make everything as far as this fight goes a little bit easier, and you'll be able to grab Ordovis Greatsword, which is also a strength and faith weapon, and again, it's a lot of fun to use. You're going to see me use it through the end of this video as we go over bosses, mobs, build stats, and everything you need to know. And there it is on the map there. It's at the second dungeon in the Altless Plateau. It's the one near the Draconic Tree Sentinel. You have to work your way all the way through the bottom, and then once you're at the bottom, you can take on those 2 Crucible Knights, and you can net Ordovis Greatsword and the Crucible Axe set. Next up here, we're going to be taking on a couple different bosses with the Crucible Knight set, and then we're going to be using Ordovis Greatsword mainly. We started out with aspects of the Crucible Tail to get in a little bit of posture damage and a couple extra hits. Now, as far as Ordovis Greatsword goes, the Ash of War is the selling point. It is completely chargeable, by the way, which means it's boosted by the Godfrey Icon to get even more damage. Makes it a solid option. You're going to see later in the video as well, it does good posture damage. And as I mentioned, the split between this, having that as primary physical with just a little bit of holy damage does give it a little bit of an advantage over some of the weapons that are pure holy given bosses' resistances. As far as the actual AR on the weapon goes, it's pretty substantial for a greatsword. For the weight, you're getting a lot of damage out of this. Even though it's split damage and it does have some holy damage attached to it, you're going to get a lot out of it. I did try to use breath in there, didn't end up working out. It doesn't do a lot of damage. You can boost the fire stuff on it, but overall, wasn't too impressed with the damage. And then we went back to Ordovis Greatsword. Finish off the tree avatar. And next up, we're actually going to do a little bit of a mix-up here, and I want to show you what the other Crucible Knight would look like, and that is the Celiaria's Tree version. I'll explain where to get that, and then we're going to use that on Golden Shade here. For the chargeable attack on this, it's actually quite good and gives you a good ranged attack, so I'm going to show it off a little bit in this fight, although again, I'm getting beat up a little bit here. As far as the tree set, though, the Crucible Tree set and Celiaria's Tree, you get that in Deep Root Depths. The tree is the drop from the Crucible Knight that's there, and then you can get the set behind it, which will net you the other version of the Crucible Knight stuff. And by the way, the setup that we're using is going to be useful for both, because both Ordovis Greatsword and Celiaria's Tree are both chargeable by the Godfrey Icon, and they're also both boosted by the Shard of Alexander. You can use Celiaria's Tree with the Crucible Tree set, and then you can use Ordovis Greatsword and the Crucible Horn Shield with the other set, and they both fit the theme, are very lore relevant if you want to mix up either one, and you can use both, as I mentioned, with the same setup, build, and stats that we have. That being said, after Golden Shade goes down, we're going to take on Morgott with Ordovis Greatsword. We're going to use our original set and my personal favorite set here after we take on this NPC enemy really quickly with Ordovis Greatsword. For Ordovis Greatsword, this is an absolute smasher as far as NPC invaders go and regular enemies. It can pretty much knock them down consistently, and it does massive damage as well. As you can see there, not much of a threat whatsoever. And the Black Knife enemy went down fairly quickly. Let's get into the Morgott fight here, where we're going to be using Ordovis Greatsword and trying to get a posture break, charging it up and seeing how much damage we can get with our Crucible Knight build. We're also using Golden Vow, and then you can use something like Blessings of the Erdtree or Blessings Boon for some health because it kind of fits the theme anyway. And then we're using Flame Grant Me Strength to get even more damage. Let's go in and take on Morgott. Alright, first things first, after 2 buffs, let's see how much damage Ordovis Greatsword does with its unique Ash of War, and we're able to use the Shackle there real quick, and we're going to try to get as many hits in as we can and see if we can build up posture damage. Alright, as we continue to hit Morgott here, of course he ended up getting the posture break there. We ended up getting the posture break. He went down, took a little bit of extra damage, and then obviously he is going to phase because this is Ordovis Greatsword after all. We're not going for a one-shot here. And after he phases, let's see how much damage we can continue to do with Ordovis Greatsword. And one of my favorite Ashes of War in the game. It really does hit hard. It's fun for Strength and Faith. And Strength and Faith is probably my favorite setup in the entire game because they do really good damage, Strength and Faith weapons, and they give you a lot of variety too. There's a lot you can do with them, and then obviously with this build, you can always use the Blasphemous Blade as well. I know I almost got killed there, but it's not going to matter much. We got him in one try anyways. But yeah, you can use the Blasphemous Blade if you get caught up with any of the more holy resistant bosses. And Ordovis Greatsword hits really hard too. It's a really powerful weapon that you can use for the majority of the game. By the way, I wanted to mention real quick before we get into mobs, buff builds, stats, everything that you need to know. If you're not subbed to this channel and you love overpowered PvE builds, be sure to sub to this channel. You're not going to want to miss out. We've been doing crazy builds lately, and we're going to continue to do awesome Elden Ring content. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. Alright, on to mobs in the final fight in this game, which will be regular enemies. We're just going to mix up different things. I used Tail there. I'm going to show off Horns, Breath, a couple of different incantations, which can be boosted by stuff like the Fox Canvas Talisman and the Ritual Swords Talisman. All of these things, for me personally, as far as regular enemies go, I like Horns a lot. I obviously love Ordovis Greatsword. You saw me highlight that mainly in the video. Siluria's Tree is awesome too. As far as the incantations themselves, obviously they fit the lore, but they're not the most powerful. They can be useful, but they're not incredibly powerful. I feel like they could use a little bit more of a buff, at least in my opinion. In PvP, they might be a little bit better. I'm not sure. I haven't done PvP in a while. But as far as PvE goes itself, Tail does a little bit of posture damage. The Fire one, even after you buff it with fire buffs, doesn't do a ton of damage. And then as far as Horns go, I found it more useful for regular enemies. Let's finish up the fight with regular enemies here with a couple of different things. I think we're going to use Breath at the end here just to show that off. And again, I did try it with the Fire Scorpion Charm and then the Fire Tear as well, and I didn't get a ton of damage out of it. It is cool to look at, but it is a little bit underwhelming compared to some of the other fire things you could do in Elden Ring. Alright, as we finish off the regular enemies here, we're going to talk soon about buffs, builds, stats, everything you need to know to make this powerful Crucible Knight build. And as far as the regular enemies go down there, Breath, again, a little bit underwhelming even if you do boost it with stuff, but it is fun to use at the very least. Let's go into buffs here, and first things first, we're going to drink our tear. Then we're going to cast the longer duration stuff like Golden Vow, and then if you're using Blessings Boon or Blessings of the Erdtree because they last longer, always go with the longer duration stuff first. Then we're going to fill up our FP. Then we can use Flame Grant Me Strength. After that, we're going to fill up our FP, and then we can use aspects of the Crucible Tail. After Tail, we can use Horn, which I really like. I like Horns on the regular enemies because it knocks them down. Then we can use Breath, which, again, a little bit underwhelming, but really fun to use and fill up our FP. Then we can use the Crucible Horn Shield there. It has Shield Bash on it, by the way. It is a somber shield, so you can't change the ash on it. And then we can use Ordovis Greatsword, charge that up, and get a lot of damage out of it. It's really powerful and probably my favorite part of this entire build. Let's get into the build. This, we have Ordovis Greatsword plus 10. We had the Erdtree Seal, which is a weightless seal. The Crucible Horn Shield. We had the Crucible Axe set on. Godfrey Icon. Fox Canvas Talisman. Shard of Alexander. We had Great Jar's Arsenal on for the weight, and then you can use the Holy tier and something like the Faith or Strength tier or even the Defense tier. Let's get into stats for this build. Now for stats, if I didn't have the extra points in Arcane because I started out as the Bandit class, I would go for 45 Faith and 45 Strength. Having 45 of each will give you good damage out of Ordovis Greatsword while getting reasonable damage out of the incantations and makes you a powerful Strength and Faith build. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I hope this turns you into a powerful Crucible Knight in Elden Ring. By the way, the lore-accurate Crucible Knight build, thank you Divinity, by the way. You are the one that did this in the channel build suggestion, so I appreciate that. Everything was really detailed and we ended up going on with it. If you have a build suggestion, please put it in the channel suggestions on the Discord and I will get to it as soon as possible. If you're not subbed and you love overpowered PvE builds, be sure to check out all the awesome builds that are on my channel. There's like an entire library there now. Thanks for watching, and as always, I will catch you guys there.